This is Vermont Film Essentials. My name is Devon Ewald.
I'm David Metzger.
And today I'm really excited to talk about a movie. It's called Latte Lant. It's from 1934. It's directed by Jean Vigo. And really excited to talk about it today because I feel like it's one that just does not get mentioned enough in the canon of great works in cinema.
To the point where I didn't even know that it existed. I was thinking about, like, I'm sure at some point in film school, I'm sure it came up.
But his works are so minuscule on the whole that I feel like it's just one of those that, like, unless you really want to throw a bone to him, a lot of people aren't.
Right.
You know?
So I have to, again, thank you for throwing me that bone, because I sat down and watched it, and it reminded me of when I was in film school and a class would come up or a professor would come and say, like, you have to watch this movie. And of course, you know, with all of us in film school, whenever something like before 1939 came up, it was like, you know, groans, like, oh, we gotta watch a silent movie, oh, we gotta watch an old...
Passion of Joan of Arc kind of thing, yeah.
But like, you know, remembering seeing The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and saying, like, oh my God, this is Tim Burton. Sunrise. Like, you know, seeing that scene in what is it, Way Down West, where they're skipping the ice.
I've never seen that.
Oh my God! So Lillian Gish.
But movies like that, where you're like just blown away by the movies.
And what I loved doing was, like, you know, connecting those dots and saying, like, oh my God, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari certainly influenced Tim Burton.
Right.
M was like watching Seven.
Right, because these are benchmark films.
Yeah.
I mean,
but with this, it was just like sitting down and, you know, what I love about like films like this is that they're so, this is like, you know, what, 20 years, maybe not even, into film being a medium. And it's so inventive.
That's literally insane. I think he birthed David Lynch and people like him.
Yep. I mean, there were shots, like, I had to, like, write down, like, oh my, like, there was like a shot of her, it was her listening to the radio or the dictaphone or whatever, and there's like this slow push in to her listening to it, and I'm like, wow, like, it feels so modern.
You just made me think it's like Mulholland Drive and like pushing into Naomi Watts, only because she has, I think Lynch may have been, now that I think about it, doing an homage to Juliet. Because it is one of those films, I feel like it's a back pocket film for people like that. That it informs a certain level of charm. This is the thing about France for me. I love Godard, I love René Clair, I love different sensibilities, right? He's like off the map. Like, there's people doing things and like trying to execute things. He's like, I don't care.
Right.
I'm Jean Vigo.
Right.
I literally just, my dad was an anarchist who was killed in prison. So when I was 12, so I went to a boarding school where they changed my name so I could be protected from that. Yeah, like, wow, dude. Reading about this guy's story, it's like, yeah, he's that uncompromising of an artist, and he birthed people like, I don't. It's very interesting, man, because he has an enchanting quality that I like attached to, like René Clair, Love Me Tonight, Ruben Mamoulian, certain French films that are so charming.
Jean Cocteau.
Yes, absolutely. Cocteau's a little like also like blends into Stark for me though, where it's like, whoa, it's like compelling shadow work and all that stuff. But like he blends, it's not like he's trying to do anything. I think that's why it's so crazy. He only made one feature film, and it doesn't feel like it's trying to duplicate anything.
Right.
But it's just what it is. Like, it's amazing, man.
Watching it, it was like any film about a relationship, it felt like I'm seeing the first movie about a relationship.
Wow.
Like, really
like
about
Overboard,
a relationship.
almost, it's literally like Overboard tried to remake this, but like, you know, not with...
Well, and, you know, as much as I loved it, you know, I saw Phantom Thread in it. You know, of the jealousy between them, and, like, you know, that I can't even stand you looking at.
That's the thing, that the reason why it's such an epic film is because not only is the cinematography just astounding, the editing, all the technical aspects, but in the storytelling, but there's just something about the character studies that are being done. Like, Jules is one of the best characters of all time, and Michel Simon plays him with this purity that is one of the most special things I've ever witnessed in cinema. I think of The Champ. I forget, early 20 or like late 20s film, and it's Victor McLaglen, maybe. God, I could be wrong, but it's just this like unassuming charm that's just so pure, man.
Well, I thought about all three of the performances that I was kind of taken aback, because I'm like, I'm not watching what we think of as old style acting.
Right, of just like
I'm really like
one
just watching
note
being
overacted. Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Even someone like Jules, where you're like, oh, like it's not that he's playing it over the top. His character just is that type of boisterous, big character, right?
Right.
But there's enough humanity within him, and enough where you see these little touches that he does, that you're like, oh, I'm not watching a 20s style Hollywood actor be theatrical.
Right.
I'm just watching someone who's like, oh, he's playing this type of character.
It felt like Anthony Quinn
Yeah.
if Richard Jenkins was like speaking as honestly, it was like this like sensitive soul that seems rough around the edge. He's rough around the edges because clearly he has his artifact collection and his beautiful things, and it's like he takes such pride. That scene is so charming, man. Like when he's showing all the stuff to her.
Yeah.
And she's like, what's this? It's like, no, it's his dead friend's severed hands pickled in a jar. Like, what is that? Lynch, paging David Lynch.
Yeah.
Like, Cronenberg. I feel like there are so many different directors that he may have influenced by his imagery alone. Guillermo del Toro, Kronos. Like, there's just things that I just see because I'm like, this is a benchmark film. This is one of Jim Jarmusch's favorite top 10 films.
Yep.
This is Sight and Sound said it was the 6th best film of all time in 1992.
Yeah.
6th. Oh, so only 5 other films that are better than this ever.
Right.
Like, obviously it's a list. But the fact that you say La Talente and 13% of the population would know what that is a problem.
Right.
Right? Like, I'm just saying, like, it's like there's a point where like this film is underappreciated.
Right. And maybe there's something to be said that it's like, well, if it was more well known, would it be so, would it have that, like,
Right.
You said it before, it's like it's a diamond in the
Well,
rough,
I don't mean
right?
commercially received at the time. I don't mean
No,
like...
I know.
Right,
I mean,
right.
like it's
you
not
mean like the fact that it's such a just like fine really makes it that much more
and that's what makes
appreciable.
it a perfect quintessential back pocket film, because it's like not everyone knows this, man. I'm going to pull this out.
It's actually way more of one than ones we've kind of identified in the past.
Right.
Because it's so like that record you find.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this is where I have to shout out World of Video, because in my early to mid 20s, I spent such a beautiful time at that place and all the people involved, and making certain films known to me, like, oh, you have to see that, like what you were talking about. It's that same thing when you watch that movie that another person is like, oh, you have to see that because someone else said it to them.
Right.
It's just this, it's one of those things, man. And it's like to you and then to them, and it's like I want people to watch La Talente.
Yeah.
I want people who have Netflix through the mail to order La Talente.
And it's like this. It's a gift that keeps on giving, because it's like oh my God, you haven't seen it. Well, I'm going to give you a present right now. And then the other present is when like that person sees it and then comes and is like, oh my God.
Well, because essentially it starts to just be about such simple, effective storytelling, and I thought of Cassavetes a lot when I was researching Jean Vigo, because it's someone who, for God's sake, he died a month after the film came out. The man's health was continuously in jeopardy. he just lived to make movies.
Yes.
God, and it's so essential. Like there may not be another story that's more. There's a reason that a critic said it's not so much a masterpiece as the definition of cinema.
Yeah.
Like where it separates itself from the great body of work. Where it's like, whoa, like you loved making films so much that you literally died for it. Like this was, he almost finished the film and he didn't because he was so sick. And so the cinematographer finished getting a couple aerial shots, the editor did the final cut, and then unfortunately, precursor to Wells, the production company, bastardized it. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately that happened.
Right.
But that's the thing, it's like not having faith in something when it comes out, it's really sometimes such a detriment to it because it's like, I know times are different, but like, how can you not appreciate just the classic charm of this? Look at the stories that have existed before this that were just as beautiful, right? So it really says a lot about that production company that they were so close-minded just to be like, no, we're worried about this because it didn't do well. Right. And so what do you do when it doesn't do well? You change a bunch of stuff.
And I started thinking about, like, when I read that, I started thinking, like, okay, did he die thinking I made a movie and no one cared?
I don't know if he knew how brilliant Latte Long was, because just reading about, I think maybe we mentioned it last time, but I'm reading this about Kubrick where he was like, where his wife was like, yeah, he hoped he was good. Like, it's like, you know, a lot of these artists, they do not know if they're good or not. They're just geniuses, and they just do it. And it's like, who knows? Who knows if he knew that there would be multiple movie festivals that name their grand prize after him? There's literally multiple ones that are the Jean Vigo Award. Like when he finally received a posthumous award for Zero for Conduct, it was presented to his daughter. Scorsese wrote a letter of appreciation. Like the ones we revere, a lot of times revere someone who no one reveres, or who no one publicly reveres, right? Because these are people that are appreciated, but they do not receive that worldwide appreciation that they deserve. And it's just sometimes sad because it's like and I guess I just love that there are movies out there that we haven't seen that are those that we're going to see and be like, ow, I can't believe that exists.
That's why I'm like, well, what's better, that it's well received then, or like that you 100, you know, however many years later, someone watches it and says, oh my God.
Right. I mean, I think it's a testament to this film that it's what, 85 years old or whatever. It's probably the most obscure film we're going to do this season. And I've got 34 cards for it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the thing, is literally the combination of notes taken from watching the film, what the Wikipedia, just Wikipedia information about the making of the film and Jean Vigo's just whole story, and then just looking up Jean Vigo and reading about him is fascinating.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, that book that you mentioned has got to be great.
Yes. There was a film made about him that I can't remember the title right now, but it's it's just such a great story. This is just someone who cared so much.
And like Cassavetes, it's like, you know, whatever it takes. I just need to make a movie.
Right.
And I don't care if I don't have the, you know, the right money or the right equipment. I'm going to find a way to make it. And what's crazy about this is that, you know, mentioning at the top that, you know, we're like only about 15 to 20 years into filmmaking. I mean, it's still such a primitive art form.
Right.
And that he comes along and is, you're taking this primitive equipment that you haven't tested out, you don't even know what it can do, what it can't do, and that he's so inventive with it. Like when that shot when they are underwater, dude.
I know.
Like the whole time I'm like, come on.
Can you not see when I watched Night of the Hunter?
Yeah.
How could I not think of the quintessential underwater photography of cinema?
Right.
It may be the most special underwater cinematography ever recorded.
And then it happened in 1934.
It's the light, man. That's the thing. It's the attention to light.
And the superimposing and the way that plays, it's like, it's like an underwater dance.
And it's also when it happens. I mean, that's the thing. He cares so much about storytelling that he plants the seed with being underwater, and she's like, did you see, she's like, what did you see down there?
Right.
It's like, what was I supposed to see? She's like, well, you're supposed to see the one you love down there. And he's like, I don't see you.
Yeah.
And there's this panic that is then externalized later when he feels like he lost her. Can we talk about this? Because this film is a juggler of set pieces, and they're all so beautiful, and they're all executed seamlessly. Humor, drama, this, that, suspense. Like, it's unbelievable. When they finally get a chance to, first of all, I love Jules's selfish, like, I'm going to the tarot card reader. Like, I just love that move. He lies, he's like, I'm going to the doctor, and he's like, nope, I'm blatantly gonna just do what I wanna do. I don't care, I need a break. When they finally get to go out as a couple, the scene where the street vendor, showman dude, like, takes her through the gate opening and starts dancing with her is like one of the most, I felt like Tarantino. It felt like you can identify with how that guy feels. So Jean is like watching that happen. It's like, it's my wife, dude. Who is this dude?
Right.
Just grabbed her through the window. And guess what? He pushes the dude through the same gate opening that the dude took his wife through. He pushed him through. I mean, it's this unbelievable carousel of, when he's smoking a cigarette, the acting is phenomenal, right? Like, let's talk about, like, the acting is just on another level for the time. Like, Paul Muni was doing work in I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. There were certain actors that were method acting, or like really just like living it, man. Where like it wasn't a performance. It was like, you're blatantly feeling that in that moment. When he throws his cigarette out and he goes through and he grabs his wife back, you feel it, like a Cassavetes moment.
And that is like, that's the moment where I thought of Phantom Thread, but like the New Year's Eve sequence when he goes.
I need to watch that a second time to really refamiliarize myself with that.
Because there was such a, like, the heart of this movie is just how emotional it is and how emotionally you connect to it.
Totally.
So that it's not just like,
it's not
they're in love,
right.
There's a real, like,
or not even about how good the cinematography is, because it's like you could teach a course on. It's got like Murnau-esque like elements to it. But like you're saying, it's how much you care about what's happening.
Right. And love in all of its warts and all. Like, you love someone so much that even just someone, you can't help but feel that feeling.
It's honestly a journey, because the thing is, these are humans, man. As much as like Jules is almost like, have you seen Florida Project?
Yeah.
He's like the Willem Dafoe in that.
Sure.
He is just unbelievable. He's an amazing human. The way the cats crawl on him, by the way, did you read how Jean Vigo grew up with stray cats? Every childhood home he was in, his father loved stray cats. So instead of a pet dog, which was in the original screenplay, he traded it out for 10 or more stray cats.
Yeah.
And Michel Simon actually adopted the kitten that went into his phonograph horn.
That's great.
Like, and they actually went towards the music. Whenever the phonograph was playing, they would naturally surround the phonograph. So Vigo was one of those guys that was like, it's happening.
Yeah.
Like Malik. You talk about Malik, where he's like, get the camera.
Right.
He's like, it's happening.
Right.
You've got these brilliant, I'm sure Tarkovsky was the same way, because his movie, Poetic Realism, his movies are like something erupted. Something happened, and they were there to capture it.
Right. And I really love that came, like, I wrote it down. I was like, the detail of the cats, like it seemed like something like no other filmmaker would have done that.
Right.
Because it comes from something personal.
The first time you see a kitten clinging to Jules's back while he plays the accordion, it's like, the best introduction to his character ever. Like, you love him. You're like, this guy is so cool. He loves these cats so much. He almost loves them more than humans. He's just like, but the way you see his charm, and then you see all the flaws of Jean.
Yep.
He hits his wife in the head. He throws. First of all, he threatens to drown all the cats, and then Jules goes, "You would," or he said, "You have it in you." That was telling, man. That was telling of how much Jules knows him, because he said it under his breath. Like, it's not something where you say it demonstrably,
Right.
and you're like, "You would," you know. It's like, no, he's like, "Yeah, you would, because I know you."
Right.
Like, that was telling, man. And Jean goes through a character arc because almost at the end you don't know whether he deserves her or not.
Yeah.
Right?
But something about the, and you know, we'll talk about it with Scorsese and Raging Bull, but also you can think about,
dude, good call, man.
and
Dude,
you can
that Scorsese wrote a letter to. No, I think he likes La La Land. You're like, just maybe.
maybe.
Wow, Raging Bull, dude. That's
right.
That is astute, man. That is literally got it all.
And I was thinking like La Strada too. It's like you've got these characters who like
and
they
Joe
have
Pesci
this
is like the
anger.
Jules. No, because it's his friend who he literally is like, do you even deserve this guy as a friend?
Right.
Because you are just so self-destructive. And the blonde, just the way Scorsese let you know Kathy Moriarty was blonde, like felt like a Latte Long, right? It sort of does, man. Black and white. Didn't have to be black and white, right? I don't know, man. People who call that a boxing movie might be really far off.
Way far off.
Because
that's why
that movie is a character study of the highest order. Yeah. Holy
You know,
crap.
they do. I mean, I think it was Sports Illustrated. They did like, you know, the top 10 sports movies, and it was on it, and I'm just like, you know, okay,
Right.
I guess.
There's
but,
boxing in it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not a sports movie, I don't think.
Wow.
But yeah, like I just seeing and it's the same thing with Phantom Thread. It's like you're taking a character who you wouldn't normally identify with, who it has this anger in them, and is probably not the type of character that you'd want to hang around with,
Right.
or say like, oh, he totally deserves the girl.
Right.
But how do we lead to them to this redemption where, you know, of everything that we know
She
and
still
believe
loves
about
him,
human
though.
beings.
This is the great thing, that throughout these scenes, there's no scene that's just incidental. There's nothing that like he just like half wrote. For God's sake, this guy only lived to 29. He clearly loved every moment he ever put on film. And there's something about how when she leaves, he is in torment. Bergman, who knows, might have patterned Seventh Seal off of that checkers game, man.
Right.
There was something about it that was like, Jesus, look at Jean. He's like so despondent. He's like, Jules ends up like starting to make his moves for him until he finally like gets through to him. There's something about the set pieces that are very iconic, that really are just like, whoa, he finds the best way to transfer information.
Right.
Like,
And not be afraid to be poetic in a very real, like that's what that underwater sequence is.
Right.
And then and that's one of those things where it's like you're leading the audience and your character through this kind of like this spiritual redemption. And that's why I was so not really thrown off, but just kind of very surprised that it ended the way it did, like with the embrace and with you know, quote unquote, like the happy ending of the embrace and the coming together of it. But it's got that shade to it. It's got that shades of gray.
He ends. It's like with hope, where like it feels like some of those. I love Rene Clair, man. He is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time because he makes me feel a certain way, and it's not all sugar-coated. But he ends up communicating it to you in a way where the music is charming, everything is, but it's just something about how honest he is while being attached. It's like Cocteau, like you talk about fantasy, realism and fantasy being like fused in a way that's really effective, you know?
The when the final shot happened, you know, at first I'm like, oh, you know, again, like that kind of spiritual side, like, you know, my camera is the, you know, the angel of redemption flying above them as we follow them with the boat, and we're leading off into the water. And then I'm like, well, how the hell did they do that? You know, like they had to, what, a plane?
Right. I mean, it said Boris Kaufman got 2 aerial shots done after Vigo was no longer able to be part of it.
And I had to look at that again. I'm like, is that the same Boris Kaufman that shot on the waterfront?
Is it?
Yes.
I forgot to look up a lot of the crew on this because I was so, obviously it's like there's so much to ingest. Like, wow.
Yeah.
No wonder. So we have to give a lot of credit to Vigo, but we have to give a lot of credit to Boris Kaufman because he knew a lot about light.
Yes.
And light and dark. This movie is maybe the best I've ever seen at illustrating the difference between light and dark and how it should be captured on film. There's a scene where Jean is standing on the barge and it looks like the background is moving instead of the boat. It's like there are shots that hug the image so close that it doesn't matter when it was put out, when this movie was put out. Like, this is one of the strongest images I've ever seen. You know it when you're watching it because there's only so much you can put in a frame. So if you do it in a way that makes you literally experience something outside of the average, there's a reason there's like multiple quotes from people saying this is like one of those that's like outside of the average cinematic experience. Because it is. Because it actually introduced a lot of things. You talk about when it was put out, like it really was that close to the beginning. So like there's things he's doing in this and people that he, who knows what, I won't even look for it. There's a great quote from a New York Times film critic, I think it's Andrew Johnston, who talks about how great film history has very few Keatses and Shelleys, artists who had so much promise and burned out before their time and left behind a limited, but he is the one. We're like, what would this guy have done?
Right.
He may have eclipsed Wells. I mean, that's my
Yeah.
like contribution. If like aliens invaded and said, you need to tell me who is the greatest, like I would be like Orson Welles. That's just me though.
Right.
If at gunpoint I had to say it, that's what I would say. Everyone has a different one, right?
Right.
But he could have, in that film, he shows you something that lets you know he could have been the greatest filmmaker of all time. And I truly believe that. That's how good that movie is. It really is. Like, there's nothing like it.
I was also going to say, in regards to, I'm sure of Vigo, but also of Boris Kaufman, is the scenes in Paris. What's great about them is that you feel like they were shot by someone who lived in Paris or knows Paris so well. Like, it didn't feel like, it was the first time where I was like, oh, I finally get
It's
Paris,
like
right?
Scorsese shooting in New York City, though,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's the same type of thing. You're feeling like, or like the way Rossellini shot. Like Italian neorealism.
Yep.
You think of that as like the way these neighborhoods are being shot.
Because they don't romanticize it. They don't come out and be like, look, there's
Well,
the
and
Eiffel
that's
Tower.
what speaks volumes about him and makes him sort of a Lynchian type of figure, or Lynch a Vigo-esque type figure, is like that he balances like realism with fantasy in this way that's like really, like, I feel like it's what Ridley Scott tried to do with Legend. It's like this way of like, it's like this combination of capturing the reality, but at the same time not having that have to be too melancholy.
Yes.
Or like, there can be hope, there can be charm, there can be romance. It's interesting because he's an interesting figure, because I was reading about how the production company was like, well, there needs to be like a musical number in it, and he's like so annoyed by it that he like writes this folk song, co-writes this folk song, and then that's the musical number in it, and it's actually like making fun of the fact that it's a song in that genre. Like, I just thought that was so interesting. It's like he's so annoyed by like these, like, oh, you're telling me I have to do this? Well, I'm literally gonna like punk you, like, and no one will know, right? Like, it's such a good. He is so good at accomplishing what he wanted to do. It's such a small sample size too, man. It's like so.
Is that the song where they're singing into each other's ear?
No, it's the I think it's the one where the street vendor is singing.
Okay.
It's that whole song.
But that just made me think of that scene.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Dude, there's so many great scenes. It's like really just like filled with great scenes, and I just found myself constantly just reading about this. Though it's like there's so much ingenuity involved. Apparently, after 4 months of continuous shooting, it was over budget, underproduced. Like they weren't where they needed to be, and he was told that he had to be quick and inexpensive. And so he went out and just got a bunch of documentary-style footage. And there's a scene where there's an unemployment line, and Juliet is walking by, and that was a real street corner of real people waiting for jobs.
and that's
Right, and so Italian neorealism.
Yep.
Like look at how a lot of these movies were made of. No, these are real people going through real stuff, and it speaks. It really speaks to what his upbringing, and who his father was, and what he endured, and how his life was informed. If you're experiencing all that by the age of 12, well, yeah, by the time you're like 20, you're a different person than this person who hasn't experienced any of that. So it's really a lot like Billy Wilder, people like that experience trauma and then like go on to, they don't want people to feel that anymore. So they want to make people feel a certain way.
right.
And it's interesting because I don't know if I've seen Zero for Conduct. If I did, it was so long ago, but like that was banned. And then it's like, he didn't necessarily want to do this. This was like a last option. He like wanted to make this other film about his dad's friend, and then it just like veered into this, and then he's like, well, if I rewrite these parts.
Right.
So the fact that he like settled for this and elevated it with help
Right.
to where it was is amazing.
And you do feel that in the same way that you feel it with Billy Wilder and some of these other filmmakers who come from that type of trauma, is that they want the audience to leave with a sense of hope and a sense of
Spielberg.
but they don't want to shy away from, like, I'm going to show you the sour,
Right.
I'm going to show you how terrible the world is, but I'm also going to give you some sweet too. And it's like this, and there's
Because
this
the
great
sweet
balance.
means more if you're aware of how sour it can get.
Yeah.
And it's a journey. And
Capra's the same way. Early Capra, where he could have, the up of the ending, the uplift of the ending is only so uplifting because you've been through so much.
What the protagonist has endured. I mean, yeah.
This is it's one of those films that it's just, I love it because it's one of a list of films that you can say for anyone who has difficulty watching older films, or why do I have to watch something that was so many years ago,
Right.
and what can I get from it? You just sit down and it's like you have no idea the treasure trove you're about to open.
I read this part about how Vigo was worried about sound quality because of Zero for Conduct. It wasn't quite what he wanted. So even though he had better equipment, he was like worried about it. So he told Michel Simon because Michel Simon had he had the most dialogue, but he had a, I guess like known, like inarticulate way of speaking. So it was like, why don't you repeat like every question that you receive in the script. And then he's like, oh, let him be. And then he's just repeating, and it creates this like natural, just like where you just get it,
right.
Where he's just, and that came out of a worry about budget or about like, you know, and it's this ingenuity that fuels all these great things.
And she's wonderful.
She really is. She's special, man. You're with her every step of the way.
Yeah.
You feel it. Like her moment-to-moment acting is really great. And you feel it when she is like, I don't know, she's very interesting because neither of them are exempt from like where you're like, well, why did you do that?
Right.
Right? So when she's on that beach, and she even considered for a moment, because obviously she felt gratified a little bit when the street vendor like dragged her through and was dancing with her, right?
Right.
But then when she's on the beach and he comes back, he's like, let's go to Paris. I'll take you to Paris. She like kind of considers it for a second. And I guess I feel like that scene is so honest, and it shouldn't have us judging her at all. Because she was hit by her husband. For God's sake, he's no saint.
Right.
So the fact that she's considering it is natural. And then he comes back, and then he's like, get out of here. You know? So it happens the way it happens, but I feel like each actor is allowed to go on their own journey. I heard about how Vigo was aware that the actor who played the cabin boy didn't have a lot of experience and was kind of like awkward in front of the camera. So he like worked things into his character so that it like made sense for him to be awkward. Yeah. he created things
right.
that made it so. Who knows if that like initial like thing with the flowers. Right. It's like, what? Go get, you know, like the way. I love the way you're introduced to Jules when he's like, what are you gonna say to her? He's like, you're gonna say, I hope you have a good stay on the Latte Long. Like, I just think that's so cool, man. This guy is like, it implies it's such a lived life, like such a storied life of like going to these different places and just enduring all this. But like, he's really kind of an interesting character, man. I feel like he's the takeaway. Mm-hmm. As much as this romance is really cool and these two characters, something about Jules, man. He's what sticks with you, in my opinion. Because there's something about his story that is like a lasting lesson mm-hmm. about humanity. Mm-hmm. He's a saint, man. Show me the thing he does. For God's sake, when he chastises the cabin boy for the flowers, and then he's like, oh, go get another. He goes, where? In the middle of nowhere? It's like such a funny moment. Because you're like, of course, like, where's he going to get him? But then when he sees that the cabin boy is like stressed, he goes, I'm not angry. He goes, I won't, like he says multiple times, like, I won't yell at you. Like, even though he is like quick to like react, he cares, man. And it really shows a lot about where Jean is at for a lot of the film, because he resents that. Mm-hmm. And instead of looking at him as a sort of just like benevolent figure, he looks at him as like a threat. Mm-hmm. It's like he walks in and he's like, gets all mad, starts throwing stuff. It's like when she's brushing his hair. Right. Such a charming scene. It's so pure. The way he's like, oh, you would brush my hair? Like, it's really beautiful moment to moment, and it's so uncontrived for acting. Like, it's really a powerful acting piece. I think that needs to be really like expressed, because these are some next level people that really helped elevate acting. You look at what was going on at that time, there was still a lot of people, especially in Hollywood, who were like, listen, no, I'm gonna be, you know, it's that like, we all talk, like, we're all gonna say it this way. Right. Like, no, say it your way. How do you talk? Yeah. Right? This personal way of just experiencing things. And I felt like that really was, and I don't know if that was Vigo, or like, I read that Simone, he did the film because he wanted to help him. He saw that like his film was banned and he's going through some stuff, and he's like, I want to do this. Because that's the thing, it was Vigo's first time working with established actors. So like the fact that he got 3 heavyweights, like 2 of them were in Grand Illusion, like looking up their list of films, these people were in a lot of great films. So to do this type of thing was so beautiful.
Yeah, and it says something about him and whatever he was able to inspire, whether it was with the screenplay or you know, just him talking to them and saying like, you know, this is my vision, and like, you know, or that they could see that he, you know, it means more to him than just
Did we not talk about that with Cassavetes?
Right.
It's that same internal engine. I mean, you want to work for the engine.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you were a part in a car, you would like see that. You're like, we really, man, you're what makes us go. You know, it's the same thing, man.
Well, you know, Criterion has this box set of his. It has all of it. It has all of his early shorts. It has
Zero for Conduct.
Yes, and it has this.
Okay.
But there also might be. I'm sure there's some kind of like, you know, comprehensive documentary.
How much is that?
I think it was like I don't think it was that bad. I think it was somewhere between 50 and 100.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's weird because, you know, I only know that because when I was doing research for this, I saw that the cover, the Criterion cover, come up, and I'm like, oh no, like, so I don't even know like if it's on Blu-ray or not yet, but something to look at for sure.
You know, the guy who played Jean, he talks about what he was like to work. First of all, Boris Kaufman said working with him was like a cinematic paradise. And then the guy who played Jean said that he was always joking, even when he was like, up until he was like really sick. Yeah. And then it was like sometimes amazing and sometimes grueling, but he always made you feel like, he said he was such a vivacious person, was the quote. And Cassavetes, I can't help but think about how charismatic Cassavetes must have been on set of communicating that New York City beat poet energy of like, we're alive, let's make some art. Boom, boom, but like you're hitting on all points, you're feeling it, you want to communicate it. It's that level of, and I feel like that's what, and that a lot of that can be attributed back to French. I mean, that era of France, man. I mean, if you really look at like, and then the French New Wave, how they were affected by it. Mm-hmm. Truffaut fell in love with this movie
at like 14 or something.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously with Jules and Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, I was just, when you were talking about, you know, just thinking about the trajectory of the story and how, you know, they have an argument, they get separated, they're separated for a while, and then they come back. I thought, you know, was this on Kubrick's mind when he made Eyes Wide Shut?
Wow.
You know, and you can go on and on and on with that.
Right.
Like it's just
because if you're looking at that sample size of years between the first film and this film, there are only so many that you can identify as being like pinned movies that people are like so affected by, right? So there's only so many, and this was one of them. And he sort of feels like a Van Gogh or like an artist like that, where they may not have been appreciated in their time, but they're one of the best to ever do it.
Right.
Make no mistake.
Right.
This guy would have won an Oscar. Like, if that had been the route, he could have done that.
Yeah.
Where he could have done the, you know, that we've talked about all these directors who came over here and became, you know, and the thing is, it doesn't have to go through the Hollywood machine. It's just that a lot of times it does, because a lot of those filmmakers are like, you know what, I want to be recognized. Like, I want to work with blah 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 blah. Like, it's just how it just ends up how it ends up being a lot of time for people.
Yeah,
because they want that recognition.
Well, and I feel like Hollywood at this time was so into.
Oh, it was Claudette Colbert, Ronald Colman. Like, I feel like it was like that like era of like
But
not
they would,
too many like.
yeah, but they would get these imports from Europe, right? And like he could have had the trajectory of like a Lubitsch
Oh,
or a
right. No,
Hitchcock,
no.
right?
He actually could have entered at the time that a lot did, and then it, like, that's the thing is like was Curtis was German, right?
Who?
Michael Curtiz.
Curtiz, yes.
Curtiz. So like that's the thing is you build toward Casablanca, right? But he made La Télante, like his first feature film.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing is like not many do that, and that's why he has to be compared to a lot of these filmmakers that really do that their first time because he was a genius.
I just thought of it because we just mentioned Hitchcock, but did you see that Hitchcock Taxi Driver overhead shot? He's got an overhead shot looking down on a. It looked like the shot from Taxi Driver.
Oh no! Well, I was thinking of Psycho.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's the one. No,
Yeah.
that's the reason I love Psycho and Taxi Driver so much because I thought that Scorsese took that shot of the staircase and used it in that scene. Oh yeah, no, yeah.
I mean, that came up, and I was just like, no way, no way, it's in this movie.
Wait, it was in this?
Yeah.
I think I saw it and it didn't register with me.
And I mean, and it's not even like one of those things where it's
But
like.
it's just the way the camera moves over what's being filmed. It's
Right.
It's the right.
You know, but I mean, but did Hitchcock see that shot?
I mean, the thing
in
is,
La Télante?
you know that Hitchcock, with how dynamic Hitchcock, his film language was,
Yes.
visually, he had to have just really just like watched a lot of European cinema. Like he was heavily informed by European cinema. There's no question. Because when were his first films coming out? I mean,
Yeah,
we're talking previous to the 20s, right? There were some that were like late 10s, right? Because I mean, maybe not.
I think it was
at least
20s.
20. Okay.
Like 25, 20,
Okay, all right.
and then into
Maybe
the 30s.
okay. Because that's still very early. And I feel like he had to have. I wonder what his back pocket films were. Because he's so mammoth of just his own are just like. You're like, there's so many iconic films.
Right. Well, and that's what I like in those group of directors. What was it? Maybe not a back pocket film, but a back pocket painter or a back pocket novelist.
Well, you know, we talked about Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and about how was it the writer that was talking? Well, no, Edward Albee was talking about how he was influenced by classical music, and how it informed his interpretation of dramatic rise and fall. Right. And it's like you just really don't know what is going to influence someone. I mean, you could go to an art museum, sit in front of a painting for 2 hours, and then write a story about it because of the suggestiveness of the imagery. Mm-hmm. So it's the same with music. It's the same with anything. I mean, he just seemed like that. Vigo seemed like that type of person that was really fun to be around and loved life and really just loved capturing things. And it's just a shame that his light burnt out so soon.
To connect the dot to Night of the Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the critics that championed this film later on was James Agee.
That's right, I read that. Yeah.
Who then wrote Night of the Hunter, who I'm pretty sure was like...
You know what? I forgot that he wrote Night of the Hunter when I read his quote about how great this film was and just about Jean Vigo, how complimentary it was. I mean, that can't be coincidental. Nope. Underwater scene.
I know what I'm doing here.
Man.
I mean, no.
I mean, you could say he even like one-upped
Yeah.
the underwater scene because it's pretty spectacular, and it also takes on a macabre element.
Yes.
And gothic noir, and it becomes its own thing. But it's certainly suggested by, it's the same way Wells was influenced by German Expressionism and the use of light and dark and shadows and things like that. Is like, there's something in this film that is very, you could say influenced noir too. It's the use of the camera, it's the use of light. There's something about it that some of these shots, when I found out that a lot of the low-angled shots are just because there was snow on the ground, and when he had to capture his transition shots, it was winter, and so he's like, just film the sky. So it's like, man, like, I mean, this is one of the best film, this has some of the best cinematography I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Because of the control over the frame and what is being shown to you.
And that you can clearly see why they did what they did. Like, you know, it's not just a shot just because.
Right.
You know, it's not just because he had.
It's
to
all
hide
to
the snow.
support
Like,
the story.
Yeah.
It's not. Nothing is there just for gratuitous elements.
You feel that when you watch it because you're being communicated.
He's
to.
a storyteller.
Yeah.
And that's the power of storytellers whose images are just supporting their story. Because I feel like for Scorsese's best works, all his telltale Scorsese tricks are just to support how much you care about these characters. From Mean Streets to Goodfellas.
As much as you want to say he's just showing off,
right?
He's not.
No, it's there.
It's always there for a reason.
And people like that were heavily informed by something like this. You can tell.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
I mean,
thank you, bro. I mean, that's, it's a really fun one to share, and I'm glad that, because the thing is, coming up with like a list of what I want to contribute to that is like, it's hard.
It's very hard.
Because there's so many, but this was one where I was like, you know what? This had an impact on me, and I can't wait to watch this again, and then share it with people.
And you know, everyone out there who just watch this movie. I mean, there's so many treasures in it, and so many moments just me fiendishly like writing down like, oh my God, this shot, this shot. And that rarely happens anymore. Like, it's very rarely do I watch a movie and I'm like so just godsmacked with how the heck did they do that?
Right.
And then it's just how did they do that then? And then it's like, oh my God, I see what I see. I can connect the dots to, you know, 5 or 6 directors who clearly were influenced by this movie.
Yep.
And it's really fun and inspiring to see that.
There's nothing like it. You really can say that because, and I feel like a lot of it had to do with his sense of the impending end. There's something about it that was like he knew.
Right.
He's like, this is going to be the one.
I better get it all in.
And that it gives me chills, and at the same time, it helps. It's the skeleton of that piece. Is everything he had was put into that.
And that
And he had it.
I feel the heartache of you do that and then just no one cares.
Right.
Or no one appreciates it, or no one.
I mean, the thing is, we keep saying, you know, Cassavetes keeps coming up, but it's the same thing. Killing of a Chinese Bookie. As a film lover, you watch that, and you're like, wow, this influenced so many things.
Right.
But no one cared at the time.
Right.
So, yeah,
and that is like, you know, with Vigo, it's a little different because, you know, he died. He ended up dying too young before his time. And,
Yeah.
You know, how much more could he have done?
Right.
And with Night of the Hunter, with Charles Laughton, it's like he made something and the audience went, no. And he went, oh,
I mean, that's very interesting, man. Only feature film by Jean Vigo. Only feature film by Charles Laughton. The James Agee bridge between underwater sequences. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting connection. That's all. Because they're totally unlike each other in tone, right?
Right.
But they do have those memorable, I mean, if you're talking about underwater sequences in cinema, both those films have to pop up.
Right.
Very interesting, man. I'm glad that posterity has a way of preserving these types of movies, because it's like you just hope that there's people who care, that are going to do what they have to do to make sure that the right version of this is seen, or that this is celebrated. Because I read about an Italian critic who got a copy of the movie back in the day, like back, 20 years after it came out or whatever, and was like, show it to his friends. you know, and it's like that there were people like that who realized how great this was.
Well, and that's kind of like what adds to like the kind of the clandestine hidden gem of this movie is like, you know, we don't even want to say how we watched this movie, but you know, like that adds to like that bootleg quality of it, of like, you know, you just found that thing.
It's like you would almost watch a filmed version of someone watching it at a movie theater badly in order just to watch what happens on the screen, right? Just if that's the only way you get to watch it, right? I mean, it is that level of like.
But it is nice to know that Criterion, you know, did a great job of restoring it
and that's cool because, I mean, clearly he's up there with anyone from that period.
And I'm very happy that I now know what it is, have watched it, and it's just a rabbit hole. Like I want to, like, you know, it stinks that there's only this thing, but you know, going down that rabbit hole, you know, if you get that book, you know, I would like to read it as well.
Was something I thought about when I thought about getting it. Yeah. So, yeah, man.
All right.
Are we there?
I think we're there.
All right, man. A lot of fun talking about this
season
movie.
Just keeps getting better and better, and I'm really happy with the movies that we've chosen.
Me too.
And I really love that we keep connecting.
It's a great collection of movies, and what I think makes the overall choice of titles so strong is that, well, even with some of the ones that are more iconic, they should look at the Night of the Hunter crossover, Venn diagram of Do the Right Thing and Night of the Hunter, and then this and Night of the Hunter, and Cassavetes in this. It's like it really, there's something about it that is just very like, you can just see the love of film across the board, and that's the connection.
And it's going to continue next week when we finally get to talk about Robert Altman and McCabe Mrs. Miller,
one of my favorites.
Which is one of my favorite films of all time, and I really cannot wait to.
I mean, I just ordered it on Blu-ray, as I told you, and I just cannot wait to watch this film on Blu-ray for the first time.
The transfer's so good. We're going to have so much to talk about with that one.
We're going to be talking about a lot of cinematography and writing. Yeah, it's going to be great.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Devon, for introducing me to this movie. And go out and see it. And until next time, I'm David Metzger.
I'm Devon Ewald.